The Insta360 X4 is the perfect choice to finally take more exciting underwater videos. But if you're not properly prepared, the footage can easily look like this, or be blurred, or contain unsightly lens flares. Today, I'll show you how to take perfect underwater shots with the X4, what the best settings are, what accessories you need, and at the end of the video I'll give you a few important tips on how to avoid common mistakes and achieve better results. As a 360 camera, the X4 has two extremely wide lenses and basically two cameras. The images from the two lenses are then merged by the camera to create a 360 image. For this to work properly, the correct angle of incidence of the light must be taken into account. If you use the X4 underwater, the angle of entry of the light changes, and for this reason the lens stitching no longer works properly underwater. Your shots will look like this. The X4 is waterproof up to 10 meters and you can therefore use it underwater without a dive case, but not in 360 mode. If you don't have a dive case, you will have to use the X4 underwater in single lens mode and hold and use it like a traditional action camera. Recordings will only be taken by one of the two lenses. However, if you want to benefit from the great strengths of the X4 underwater, the invisible selfie stick effect and the free choice of the framing, then you need a dive case, specifically the invisible dive case from Insta360. And that brings us to the accessories you need to be able to use the X4 optimally underwater. Yes, the invisible dive case from Insta360 is relatively expensive, but as already mentioned, it not only serves to make the X4 even more waterproof, it also has to correctly adjust the angle of entry of the light. So it's not just a plastic cover, but rather an add-on for the lens. It should therefore be absolutely high quality. For this reason alone, I would advise against a cheaper imitation. And as you can see, the invisible dive case works perfectly. The selfie stick is efficiently removed from the shot. However, you should also know that the handling of the invisible dive case is not easy. In the course of this video, I will show you what you need to pay attention to when using the dive case and what mistakes you should avoid. Normally, I would use an action camera underwater together with a floating hand grip like this one. However, as you can benefit from the advantages of the X4 as a 360 camera when using the invisible dive case, I would definitely recommend a selfie stick as well. One of my favorite selfie sticks is the standard invisible selfie stick from Insta360 in a length of 114 centimeters, as it is very small when pushed together and can be easily stowed away. It is also well suited for use underwater. In order for the stick to disappear from the shot, it must be attached straight to the X4 as usual, and the camera must not be tilted when taking the shot. This combination then works perfectly underwater. However, the combination of invisible dive case and invisible selfie stick has one disadvantage. It sinks, not quickly, but there is a risk of losing the camera underwater. To prevent this, you should attach a wrist strap to the underside of the stick. Insta360 also offers such a screw-on wrist strap, and in my opinion, it's an absolute must-have for using the X4 in water. By the way, you can find a link to all the accessories I mentioned in this video in the video description. Insta360 also offers a bundle of X4, dive case, selfie stick, wrist strap and floating hand grip as the invisible dive bundle at a very interesting price. This bundle contains everything you need for underwater use. You will also find a link to the bundle in the description. As mentioned, you can make a number of mistakes when using the invisible dive case. So what should you pay attention to? Firstly, you should update the firmware of your X4 and bring it up to date. Especially when used in combination with the invisible dive case, the firmware of the X4 must be up to date in order to enable correct lens stitching. You must then insert the X4 correctly. If you have installed lens guards, you must remove them first. As you can see, the dive case has buttons on one side. The X4 must be inserted so that these buttons are on the same side as the camera buttons. If the display is at the front, this would be the right-hand side. There are two slots to the left and right of the lenses into which you can slide these inserts. The inserts come with the standard packaging of the dive case and the material resembles cardboard. It's an anti-fog insert. As the name suggests, it's intended to prevent the case from fogging. And it actually works pretty well. But you should regularly check the inserts, because if they get too damp, you have to replace them. Otherwise, the dive case can fog up and affect your recording. You can then close the dive case and close all four buckles. Now the X4 is ready for use underwater. But wait, there is still something missing. Before you even put the X4 into the dive case and close the dive case, you need to activate the dive case mode on the camera. To do this, simply swipe down from the top edge with your finger and open the main menu. Then swipe once to the left. Activate the dive case mode, via this icon in the top right hand corner. You can also activate the dive case mode if the camera is already in the dive case by pressing and holding the Q button, which is the lower side button. Only in dive case mode does the lens stitching work properly underwater, and can the camera be operated correctly underwater. It is therefore important that you activate it. However, the operation of the camera changes completely in this mode. You will only have two buttons and no touchscreen available. If you briefly press the lower button, so the Q button, you start and stop a recording. If you briefly press the upper button, the power button, you change the recording mode. If you briefly press the Q button twice, you can switch to single lens mode and change the lens. And if you press and hold the Q button, you can exit the dive case mode again. If you press and hold the power button, you can switch the camera off and on again. Most importantly, as soon as the dive case mode is active, recordings are started and stopped with a short press of the lower button. The upper power button switches the recording mode. I took a lot of test shots underwater for this video. This video is sponsored by Insta360. Thanks for that, because it makes it possible to make high quality and elaborate videos and to keep this channel going. To enjoy the dive case for a long time, you should also bear three things in mind. The dive case changes the incidence of light on the lens. It's therefore primarily intended for use underwater. You can also use the invisible dive case out of the water, for example when surfing. In this case, however, you must change the lens stitching settings in the app to invisible dive case above water. Otherwise, there will be stitching problems. I'll show you the most important settings of the app a little later. Personally, I think you should mainly use the dive case underwater. If it gets wet, you can see the water droplets on the image when using it out of the water. That doesn't look so good. The dive case is made of a relatively scratch-sensitive plastic. You should therefore not place it on rocks. It will get scratched very quickly. You should also avoid contact with sun cream. After use, you should store the dive case safely in its pouch. Salt water will damage all materials in the long term, including the plastic of the dive case. After using salt water, you should wash it thoroughly. Insta360 even recommends soaking it closed in fresh water for a longer period of time. This is the only way to completely remove all salt residue. You can also use one of these rings to attach the X4 in the dive case more firmly to the pole. Don't forget, for the invisible selfie stick effect, the X4 must be mounted straight. As soon as you have switched to dive case mode, you can no longer change the recording settings, such as frame rate, color profile, and so on. The currently active settings are used. For this reason, you should determine the optimal settings for your underwater recordings before switching to dive case mode. And that's why I'm going to show you now how to set up your X4 optimally for underwater shots. Apart from perhaps the photo mode, you should almost always use the standard video mode underwater. And only in 360 mode can you also benefit from the aforementioned advantages of the X4 underwater, such as reframing and the invisible selfie stick. Although the single lens mode offers the advantage that you don't have to reframe your recordings, you don't have any other advantages when it comes to image quality. The 4K single lens shots hardly look any better than reframed 360 shots. Choosing the right setting is not easy. Even underwater, the 8K resolution provides the best image quality. The difference to 5.7K is particularly noticeable on a large screen. After all, you still have to reframe your recordings. However, the highest possible frame rate in 8K is 30 frames per second. In 5.7K, on the other hand, you can shoot at up to 60 frames per second. Basically, the more frames per second, the smoother and more natural a shot looks. And since underwater shots are clearly about capturing nature and the underwater experience as naturally as possible, a frame rate of 60 frames per second would actually be a better choice. You therefore have to choose between a slightly better image quality in 8K 30 and a more natural look in 5.7K 60. Especially if you mainly watch your videos on your smartphone, the higher resolution is not so important, and you can use a setting of 5.7K 60. If on the other hand, you often watch your videos on a large screen, I would personally prefer 8K 30. And there is also something else to consider. A higher frame rate has disadvantages in low light conditions, and there can be more image noise if there is not enough light available. So if you are diving deeper and it could get rather dark, you should definitely favor 8K 30 or even 5.7K 30, which is the best overall setting for low light conditions. I would recommend 8K 30 as the default setting underwater due to the visibly better image quality. You won't go wrong with that, but in good lighting conditions and for a more natural look, 5.7K 60 is also a good choice. If you swipe from the right edge to the left, you open the menu with the advanced capture settings. I wouldn't use manual exposure settings underwater. The lighting conditions can change quickly, and as I said, you don't have the option to constantly adjusting the settings. I therefore stick to automatic mode. And here I would like to show you a few things. You can set the color profile on the far left. You can choose between standard, vivid and flat. The difference between standard and vivid lies mainly in the saturation. Vivid has more saturation than standard, especially if you don't want to edit your shots and want to share them quickly. Vivid is well suited for underwater shots. However, as it's very easy to adjust the colors in the app and add some saturation if necessary, I usually prefer the standard setting. Flat is a highly desaturated color profile that is mainly suitable if you want to heavily edit the colors of your shots. But this takes time and I usually don't use flat for underwater shots. You can use exposure value compensation, that is EV, to set how bright or dark your shot should be exposed. In underwater shots, the very bright areas usually consist of the sun, so the light source on the surface. The interesting parts of the shot are often in the darker areas. It can therefore make sense to overexpose the shot slightly. For example, by setting a value of plus 0.3. The correct white balance ensures that colors are displayed correctly. White should always look white. The correct value depends on the color of the water, the amount of sunlight and also the depth you are at. If you want to set it manually, it would therefore have to be changed constantly. This is not possible with a camera like the X4 underwater. The automatic mode also usually works relatively well, even if the automatic mode sometimes changes the white balance during the shot, which can lead to unattractive results. I leave low light stabilization on off and balanced exposure on auto. There are two other important shooting settings in the main menu that you should consider. For this, swipe down from the top edge and to the left and select the settings icon at the bottom left. Now open the image settings. Here you should make sure that the video bitrate is set to high. This way the camera saves as much information as possible when recording, which leads to a better image quality. Consumer cameras such as the X4 tend to artificially emphasize the contrast at the edges to make the image look sharper. However, this does not lead to more detail in the image and does not look professional. I would therefore advise against using a sharpness setting of high. As the image loses some of its sharpness when using the dive case, I would not recommend low either. As in most cases, I therefore use a sharpness of medium for underwater shots. However, you can easily add sharpness in post if the image looks too soft. So that we can quickly call up our underwater settings in future, we should create a preset. You can access the presets using the Q button on the right hand side. On the far right, you can add a new preset by tapping on the plus. And there is actually already a diving preset. Here you can still adjust the settings discussed and change the resolution or frame rate, for example. As soon as you have added it, you can quickly and easily call up the specified settings using the Q button. For the best image quality, you should also take a few things into account when editing your 360 videos. I use the Insta360 smartphone app today. However, most of the settings are also available in the Studio desktop app. For correct lens stitching, you need to make sure that the invisible dive case is selected under stitching in the app. To do this, tap on the settings icon at the top, on accessories and manual. Here you can check whether the dive case has been activated correctly. This usually works automatically without any problems. As we have already seen, you can also activate the use of the dive case above water here. Under Basic, you can activate Aqua Vision 2. This reduces the blue tint that overlays everything underwater and makes the colors of your shot stand out better. As soon as you have activated Aqua Vision and return to your recording, you can adjust the intensity and color of the effect here. Personally, I would reduce the intensity to 40. As already mentioned, I think that when using the dive case underwater, the shots look a little soft and sometimes even a little blurred. In my opinion, they are zoomed in a little too much. For a sharper and more detailed image and therefore a better image quality, you should adjust and significantly expand the field of view when reframing. The image now looks much sharper and more detailed, which is only logical as it now also contains more information. As soon as you are happy with the reframing and your editing, you can export the clip. For the best possible image quality, you should select the highest possible resolution, which is 4K, and the highest possible bitrate of 150. Of course, this also results in larger files and is not always absolutely necessary depending on the intended use. But this is the only way to get the best possible image quality. Now we have optimized our X4 for underwater use. We have the perfect accessories, and yet your underwater shots may not always look the way you want them to. That's why I'm going to give you 4 very very important tips and tricks along the way. And the first one is already quite crucial for good image quality when using the dive case. When you use the dive case, lens flares occur very frequently, especially when snorkeling or diving close to the surface. To prevent this, you should hold the dive case sideways. Neither lens should be facing the surface. Unfortunately, I also had to learn this first, and many of my shots therefore contain unsightly lens flares. The transition between the two lenses is also slightly more recognizable underwater than during normal use. To make the transition as invisible as possible, you should rotate the camera as little as possible underwater, because the transition between images from the two lenses can be seen even better when the camera is rotated, no matter where you take your videos. Light is crucial for good image quality. This also applies underwater. More light is usually better. So if you dive deeper, the image quality of the recording will also suffer. Also pay attention to the position of the sun and adjust your shooting angle accordingly. You don't necessarily want to have the sun shining in the image. So swim against the sun rather than with the sun behind you. At least if you want to film yourself from the front. Even if there is a lot to see underwater, fast and jerky camera movements rarely lead to good shots. Simple, slow and steady movements, for example forwards, are usually the better choice. And this is much easier with fins. When snorkeling, for example, fins make it much easier to create a steady forward movement. Always seeing the same underwater world can quickly become boring. It's therefore much more interesting if you integrate a subject into the shot, for example yourself or another person. This makes the shots much more exciting. However, make sure that the subject is not too close. It should be at least 1 meter away from the camera, otherwise it may look blurred. For this reason alone, you should always use a selfie stick and not just a floating hand grip. And that's it for today. If you want to find out more about the many features of the X4 or what the best accessories for the X4 are, take a look at my 2 related tutorials. And give me a like as feedback if you found the video interesting. There will be more tutorials for the X4, so stay tuned and see you next time.